Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching, and it's back to the 40k deathguard with this video painting up the deathguard deathshroud terminators. If you're watching this when it comes out, or round about the time, it's been a few months since I've touched my 40k deathguard, drifted off into Horus Heresy, bit of Necromunda, but it's back to the deathguard for hopefully the next few weeks to try and finish the rather large backlog of deathguard stuff I've got built up. Now, you have seen these models on the channel before. I have used the deathshroud terminators for converting into the Robute Golem and Demon Prince, one of my very first deathguard videos on the channel, and I then used the remaining deathshroud to be converted into Blight Lords. But this is the first time these models have actually stayed as they're intended. So you can see here, built exactly as the instructions go. No conversion work being done, but I am drilling the barrels of the weapons out. It just adds a nice little bit of detail, and just doing what has now become my sort of standard deathguard basing. If you are interested in exactly what I do, because I won't show the basing through the video particularly, you'll just see them paint suddenly appear on them. I have got a video of what I do with my deathguard bases exactly, with the green stuff world rollers and making the pustules bubbling out the ground, that kind of thing. So check that video out. I've got a deathguard playlist if you want to check all the deathguard videos out for the army I've done so far. So a little bit of prep work on them, no conversion work, and then I've sprayed them black and then sprayed them with a Retributor armor spray for that bronze effect, because there's lots and lots of bronze sort of age detailing on these models. It saves a lot of time and also gives some nice rusted metal effects when you're painting. So just laying down the deathguard green as the first colour, and as you can see, I'm leaving lots of kind of gaps where that brass colour is showing through, because you'd leave those around, you know, the bullet holes and the where the pustules and the dents and the cracks in the armour are. It just adds to that kind of rusted, aged effect. And you see, putting the paint on, a couple of thin coats, you see me going over those areas again, and then moving now onto the bone. Lots and lots of spiky bone pieces in these models. When you're painting bone on, the bone colour I'm using here, try and paint it in the direction that the bone is going and growing, because it just keeps those brush strokes in line. You see here, just cleaning off where I've overlapped onto the metal. Through this video, you'll see me make a fair few mistakes and correct them as I'm going. I've tried to leave some of those in. You'll also spot some pieces that I forget to paint at one stage, and because I use a wet palette, it's then going back and correcting what I've missed. So now I'm just using a nice brown. I'm using the same brown colour on all the straps and things around the model, but also on the wood, kind of on the champion here, but also on the handles of the sides they use. So it doesn't matter about the same brown, it's what we do later for the highlights. Now purple is my unit colour that I've used in all my deathguard so far. So putting that onto the robes and the cloaks, you can see there, quite a thick layer. You don't want any of the metal showing through on that stage, because, you know, cloaks don't get rusty. So be quite, you know, clear in what you're doing. Now I take a yellow colour and I will go around certain gaps in the armour, and this is almost a base layer for the nurgle's rot we're going to do later. It makes the nurgle's rot a little bit more vibrant and interesting later on. You don't have to do that, but you can see I've obviously also done it on the base there. Now the sides, going in with the black, you could do the sides silver, but throughout my army I've chosen to do them black. It's just something a little bit visually different and makes it look a little bit sort of more plaguey, in my opinion. I'm picking out some of the cables that link around the model, not all of them, and if you miss a few it doesn't massively matter, but all the major cables and things on there. Going into the silver, now you could undercoat them silver and then put the brass on, but there's not too many areas I wanted to put the kind of metallic colour, so just the ends of the guns, into some of the microphones and speakers, and then onto the chainmail that some of the models have got, but not all. And I do leave those little kind of circular sections, when you call them, in the brass colour. And even with some of the chains I've left on one model, you know, the chains that are hanging the skulls silver, but on another model I've, you know, kept them in that brass colour. Now onto tentacles, and this is going to be some super quick wet blending. So I'm taking the sort of pallid flesh colour, starting that off from the model itself, going 3/4 the way out onto that tentacle, then taking the Screamer pink colour I'm using and putting that on the very end, kind of third, maybe a quarter of the tentacle. And then you can see here with a clean brush, almost smearing the two colours together, and you'll get a slightly darker pink at the end of the tentacle where you've done, and a much lighter pink where we've gone from the flesh colour. And then you can drop on a little bit more flesh if you're not quite happy with how far it's gone down, blend it through and sort of smudge it around. Hope that makes sense. That's very quick wet blending in a few seconds about how to do a tentacle, and that is the whole process you just watched there. So 3/4 in the light colour, a sort of quarter in the darker colour, keep them wet on the tentacle, smudge them together, and then put a little bit more either white on or the pink on at the end if you want to just brighten it up. And then I take the pale flesh colour and drop it onto the little pustules on the end of the tentacle, and then take the dark pink colour and I'll put it on the pale section of the tentacle. So simple and easy. So that's all the base colours down on the model there. So now it's one of my absolute favourite for Deathguard, particularly Vallejo Game Wash all over the model. Now you put it on a good layer, but you don't want it pooling anywhere. You don't want anything too thick. So if you do, just use the brush, take it off, you know, take it on some paper or whatever. You want a nice sort of even, thinnish layer across the model. It will settle more deeply into sort of gaps and cracks, but a thin layer across the whole model is what we're going for. And you can see here it gives a nice dirty effect. You could absolutely leave the model at this stage and it'd be fine, but I like to just bring it up a level. I don't want to go for full kind of grimdark. So what we're doing now is all the colours we've already used. So I'm going to go in super speed here so you can see just how long I'm spending on each panel. So it's not a super long process, but it isn't as quick as just base coating, because what you're going for is you want the paint watered down, maybe 1 part water to 1 part paint, maybe a little bit less water sometimes, depends on how you like it, and you are putting it over almost a glaze, not quite. Put the paint on, move it around on the armour until you're happy. You don't want to go into the gaps and cracks or anything in the armour. You're putting it over that top layer, but you do want some of the kind of streakiness that the wash will have given you showing through. So take your time, build it up gradually, and exactly the same thing with the bone here as well. So we're almost glazing, sort of somewhere between the two, bit like a glaze, bit like a paint, and you're adding that on. Again, not going into the recesses, just on kind of the raised areas, but you do want to cover quite a lot of the horns and models, if that makes any kind of sense. And we're following the same process for every other colour now, with exactly the same colours we've used before. What you'll see here, I said before, I used the same brown on the leather and the wood, so I'm not actually going back over the wood at this stage. I'm leaving that exactly as it was, and that then gives the visual difference between the leather and the wood that we're looking for, even though it's the same brown on there. Onto the purple, same technique, and then across the black again here. Not putting too much on the black though, literally a couple of little knocks on there. We're not covering the whole piece. Now I'm going to show you the sort of wet blending stage again. Now it's a little bit odd because we're not really covering the whole thing again, using the paint fairly thin, just trying to hit the raised areas. So it's a bit of an odd thing to try and wet blend but not get into the recesses. But you can see here just little touches on all those areas, and you're almost highlighting where that blending was. Now this is the only different paints we're using. So now we're doing a series of technical paints and washes. We've done the skull, you can see here, with the sort of steel at the top and the flesh at the bottom, and I'm taking just a green ink, putting that into patches onto the flesh, and then after that we're taking a major purple sort of contrast paint and we're putting that onto the other patches on the flesh. So that skull and that flesh, it's had the original pallid flesh colour, then the ink wash. I haven't used the pallid flesh in it again, I've kept it dirty, and those 2 ink washes make it kind of look that little bit rotten. Now we're going to try and age the brass. So this is one of the most useful, I think, technical paints from Games Workshop, one I particularly enjoy. Brass doesn't rust, it obviously oxidizes. So now I like oxide, just really nice one to drop only onto small areas because it can get a little bit too vibrant and bright. And if you do put too much on, again, just use a slightly wet brush to take it off. But I'm using it on the rivets, the cracks and breaks in the armour, just enough to make that bit of visual difference and look like, you know, we are oxidising the armour as we go. So a very, very useful paint. You can see there, talk about mistakes, I've noticed one of the bugs that I completely didn't paint earlier on, and I've just dropped some paint on it. Now I used purple on all the bugs before, completely forgot I did that, and put the pink on, but it works quite well as well. And now we're on to the technical paint side again, finishing this off. Final stages. Nurgle's Rot, one of your absolute friends if you're doing a Deathguard army. So again, that onto the base. And I said I wasn't going to show the base particularly, but well, Nurgle's Rot, it's Nurgle. It's always nice to see more of that going on. And then all the yellow areas that we touched on earlier, we haven't reused the yellow, but I've dropped the yellow, as I said earlier, into all the areas where there's the weeping parts coming out of the vents and things, and all the gaps and cracks in the armour, and we've dropped it across there. Now this isn't the same shot as at the start, but this is the finish unit. The reason I'm saying it's not the same shot, you'll see there's maybe a little bit more glistening coming across from the armour here, because I've varnished these models, and I do always varnish my models, and if you flick back to the start to watch that rotation side, it does give a slightly different visual effect when you varnish and don't varnish a model. Just one to put on your radar there. So that's the unit done. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, and I'll see you on another video.